Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EM World. As always, I am your host, Jessica, but I'm not the only Jess here this week, because with us this week as the guest, we have Jess Levine here to talk about their game, Galactic and Going Rogue. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be, with another Jess, the Jess to Jess.
Absolutely, it is the best names, and we are the best people because we work in tabletop RPGs, so we get to talk about games, which is very fun. So we're going to be talking about Galactic and Going Rogue, which is live right now on Kickstarter. There's about a week left. If you're watching this live, thank you for joining us. In the show notes, there is a link to the crowdfunder, and if you're watching, it's on the screen and in the chat, so you can click through now. So if any of this is interesting to you, you can go there and have a look. But before we dig into that, Jess, I would love to talk about you and your background and history with games. You are a Crit Award winner. You do many things, but maybe if we focus in on you as a tabletop RPG designer. So I'll start going back in time. What is the first game that you remember playing, the first tabletop game?
The first. Oh, okay. So that I definitively know.
Okay.
I hate to say it, but it is D&D. And so I played D&D 3.5 at like midnight at a friend's birthday party in high school. And actually, like, I remember my first experience of D&D having all these like things I wanted to do with my character and just being told by the DM, that's not in the rules. That's not in the rules. You can't do that. And so my eventual move to like indie tabletop games, I actually feel is like presaged by my very first experience of being like, why are all the cool things that we could be doing something we can't do? And the answer is because there are other games that you can do that in.
Okay, I love that. So where did you go from D&D? Because it sounded like the rule set was restrictive for you for what you wanted to do. So where did you go exploring from there?
Yeah, I played D&D for 6 years because I didn't understand that there was much else, which is why I love the show
Sure.
existing. And then I went to Shadowrun mostly, which is still a bit of one of your like trad systems, a bit of a really small microsystem called Simple D6. And then I played The Quiet Year by Avery Alder. And that game just like changed my understanding of what games are and could be. And I don't think I played the same system twice for like 2 years. I just played like, 30 different games right after The Quiet Year and really just opened up the world of indie games for me.
Beautiful. I love that. And I can tell that journey is kind of very much influenced your game design. Also, definitely with Avery Alder, because there's an influence in this work here as well from that.
Yes.
But how did you start designing and making games? Because a lot of people enjoy playing games and are in the hobby and enjoy a varied TTRPG diet, but they don't necessarily want to make their own games. So what was that leap for you?
Hilariously, it was Going Rogue. So the first edition of Going Rogue, and this is kind of the third, was my first game. And it happened because my early pandemic, like lockdown coping mechanism, was some people like baked sourdough. I played Galactic. I played Riley's Galactic with a group of 3 people online, and we got obsessed. We wrote 150,000 words of short fiction in the universe of our characters together between the 4 of us.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we were really in it. And when we did, I like DM'd Riley to say we were playing, and Riley was like, "Oh, I've always thought about doing a second edition of Galactic. Would you all playtest some stuff I'll write up?" And so the second edition of Galactic happened because of my play group. And then when Riley released it 6 months later, she ran a game jam. She ran a game jam for the release of Galactic 2E, the like expansion content. And I was like, oh, this is kind of perfect because I love Galactic as a system, but my favorite Star Wars movie is Rogue One. And so I was like, yeah, here we go. Yes, you understand.
Yes is no.
And yes, Jess's do now. I loved Galactic so much as a mechanical system, and I obviously loved playing it, but I didn't think it would be good at telling the type of stories that Rogue One did, the like sort of troubled martyrs instead of the charming heroes, which is really what Galactic is aimed at. But the mechanics could do it. You just needed to change what was in it. And so I wrote up new playbooks, new pillars, and all themed off of sort of the Rogue One characters. And then I was also very much processing. I was very involved in street anti-fascist action during the first Trump administration, and I was processing a lot of feelings about that I also found reflected in Rogue One.
Yeah.
And so it came out of my love for all those things, and I made it. It was originally going to be an expansion, and then I realized like you couldn't quite use them together, so it kind of became its own new like play set. And that is how I got started. I submitted that in the jam like 2 months later. I think no one played first edition who didn't sit at my kitchen table with me. And then years later, when I was like, now I know what I'm doing, I made a second edition that was kind of expanded into its whole own game, and lots of improvements.
Absolutely. We do have a question from the comments watching live. If you're listening to the podcast, you can join the live recordings most weeks, by the way, on Mondays at 10 p.m. BST or 5 p.m. Eastern. And the question we have is, just to give context, you also have published I Have the High Ground. So this question is linked to that. They're asking, why are swords so cool? And if you were a sword, what kind of sword would you be?
That is a great question. So one, swords are so cool because you can put them under someone's chin and tilt it up and stare into their eyes. And that's why swords are cool. It literally, the dedication is I have the high ground is 2 sword lesbians everywhere. And so like, good question for Pride Month also.
Yes.
And then if I was a sword, what kind would I be? That is an excellent question. I don't play very many fantasy games, but when I did, actually no, I'm gonna cheat, and I'm gonna use the cover of I Have the High Ground because this was a very specific thing that I wanted. Okay. There's something called a flame-bladed sword that has nothing to do with actually fire. The sword itself is like curly, like it wriggles back and forth like a snake is the best way I can describe the shape.
Yeah, no, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, and I had no idea. I'd like seen those in like art or something, and when I went to the artist for I Have the High Ground's cover, Ezra was like, oh, my partner actually does HEMA, like modern, like medieval European sword fighting martial arts, essentially. And that's called a flame-bladed sword. And yeah, I can absolutely draw that for you because I thought it looked so cool. And I didn't want to quite do lightsabers, but I was like, I want the swords to be weird and fun. And so there's a flame-bladed sword on the cover that I love.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that question and for referencing I Have the High Ground, both of which can be found on itch.io. So if that game's interesting to you as well, there's links in the show note for that game.
And actually, for the crowdfunder that we will be talking about, you can get an exclusive full color cover printing with a new artist. We are like doing an exclusive run of it that has the same artist as the Going Rogue cover in full color instead of the sort of black and white line art. So as we talk about everything else, you can get that as a part of it as well.
Well, fabulous. What a wonderful segue. Let's just start talking about the crowdfunder. So the crowdfunder is Galactic and Going Rogue. So these are 2 kind of games that, like as you explained before, Going Rogue kind of was birthed out of Galactic, but you're bringing them together in a hardcover book. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. We actually, even before we did this, have had people asking on Itch, have you considered printing these games? And even asking, have you considered printing Galactic and Going Rogue in one book? And we just had to keep our mouths shut and be like, we've thought about it. Don't worry, we're on the way. But they make a good duo.
Fantastic. And this is it's a 3rd edition as well. So what's kind of new about the 3rd edition, or what changes are kind of in it?
The biggest thing is that we are going to have, this is my cat, Ripley.
Yeah,
her
cat's
sister,
Newt. Excellent. Yeah.
Yes. But the biggest change is just like having an art and layout budget. So Galactic and Going Rogue were currently black and white games. All the internal art is just public domain stuff with layout by Riley and I, which is that's not our skill set. So we get to pay just some incredible artists to fully illustrate the book. And like give it just like a really cool new layout. David and Woshi are amazing. But on top of that, we also are doing a lot with teaching tools. So like ways to introduce people to GM-less games, which can be like challenging and different. And we've got a bit of that in 2nd edition, but like I have been working a lot, both like in the writing, but also in mechanics for beginning play to help teach people how to play these games. And I'm feeling very excited about that. We're also going to do long play examples that show like here's the original system that we use. Belonging Outside Belonging is the engine we use, and it was based on, it was created for Avery Alder and Benjamin Rosenbaum's Dream Askew, Dream Apart. And in that book, they have like 15-page examples of here's what play looks like of everyone talking around the table. So we want to try and add some of those in. And then for Going Rogue, myself, I'm also working on some mechanical changes. Just like I've been a game designer for another 3 years, and I look at my playbooks and I go, there are ways we can spruce that up. Or Going Rogue has a mechanic called the Sacrifice, or the Sacrifice Fate, in which you know from the beginning that all your player characters are going to die at the end. You're going to give your lives in a like tragic act that moves the galaxy closer to freedom. And you're playing in the sort of dramatic irony of knowing that's where we're going. But why do our characters, who usually start as like cynics and loners, become willing to do that? And I've got some ideas I'm excited for that I've actually been like testing out these last 2 weeks for like improvements to how the Sacrifice Fate works and really like opening up what that process can look like. So I'm excited about that as well.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, for those that aren't familiar with the Belonging Outside Belonging system, could you give a little overview of what it is, so what mechanically the game would look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So Belonging Outside Belonging is they call it also No Dice, No Masters. Technically, the Going Rogue box set, the Galactic and Going Rogue box set has dice because you can randomly roll for like ideas for places and NPCs. But like as far as resolving what you do, there's no skill checks. Instead, you have strong moves, lateral moves, and vulnerable moves. And what those are, vulnerable moves, are things that you do that tell the table, show my character's weakness right now, make me look bad. Like any good story is founded in a character's vulnerabilities and their mistakes and the ways that they need to grow. And so when you do a vulnerable move, you take a token, which is sort of the core central mechanic, this token economy. And in taking that token and doing that move, you're saying to the table, you have permission, and in fact, I encourage you to inhabit the world or your characters to make me look bad. And so the spy that you've got on screen here has vulnerable moves like lie to a comrade about your capabilities or intentions, or cause collateral damage to someone who didn't have it coming, or even just say, the mission is bigger than any of us. And so those are all things that this archetype, this spy type, who would be like Cassian and Rogue One, not Cassian and Andor, actually. Cassian and Andor is a different playbook, and I could talk about that at some point. But these are things that a spy might do that are like not really good things to do to people, and that like play up what is like hurting or aching for this character. When you get that token, you can then spend it on a strong move, which are the moments where you spend a token and you tell everyone at the table, play to my strengths, make me look good, solve this problem. This is a heroic moment for my character. And so the spy has strong moves like move you and your comrades around an obstacle you can't overcome directly, or commit to your principles in a moment of collective uncertainty, or vanish without anyone noticing. And so instead of a stealth roll, you just have, did I make a mistake earlier with my vulnerable move? Did I look bad? Cool, I'm going to cash that in to vanish in this moment, and I just do it. The tokens basically represent narrative agency, the ability to like influence the story. And Riley with Galactic did something really clever here. That's actually an innovation on the engine, which are called lateral moves. Lateral moves say, if you play into my story, you can have one of my tokens. You give them a token. And it's basically saying, I'm going to take a little narrative agency away from you because I'm expecting you to play into what my playbook does. But when you do, you get a token so that you can then influence the story. And so spy's lateral moves are ask someone to put themselves at risk for the mission and give them a token if they do. So like be the person who's like, are you willing to give your life for this? And then give them a token if they agree. Or persuade a hesitant individual that an action is worth the consequences and give them a token if they listen. Lateral moves were a Riley innovation on the system that I think are fantastic. And they connect to one other new thing that Riley added to Belonging Outside Belonging. So in this GM-less system, how do you run a system without someone like, playing the world? You do that through what Belonging Outside Belonging calls setting elements. And so those are like in the original games, it's like society intact because you're queers living on the edge of the post-apocalypse, or it's like the roving gangs, all of that sorts of stuff. In Galactic and Going Rogue, this is the liberation, which is to say the rebellion, or the mandate, which is to say the empire, or the space between, the mystical force that connects all things. These are big things in the world. And in other Belonging Outside Belonging games, like Dream Askew, Dream Apart, like Wanderhome, which some people have often heard of, the setting elements, you just like hold them, and they have things that they want called desires, and you figure out, okay, well, how do I enact those? How do I act as that part of the world or the NPCs attached to it? In Galactic and Going Rogue, we call them pillars instead of setting elements, and they also have moves. They also participate in that like token exchange. And so the mandate might foreshadow a larger threat and gain a token. You set up the Chekhov's gun that you're going to deliver on later. And then later you can put someone in immediate danger and give them a token, which is to say, I'm going to strip narrative agency from you. I'm going to say, this is what happens to you, but here's your token so that later you can overcome it. And I think that was a really smart innovation from Riley to like help make GM-less play easier and like have a mechanic that really guides you through that. And then NPCs also have moves that they can do. But they're associated, this is again Riley's innovation, they're associated with a pillar. So every NPC is a liberation NPC or a mandate NPC, and all their tokens go onto the pillar. So when when an NPC with the character trait austere lifts their head up high and gains a token, it goes onto their pillar, so you don't have to maintain 400 token pools. It really like simplifies things. I think it's a really, really cool system that emphasizes the connections between people and these narrative moments more than it does how do we find the lever to pull to get out of this trash compactor or something like that, right? The moments in the inspiring media that really stood out to us were these relational moments, much more than like figuring out the right combination of skill checks to like get to the place where we shoot the torpedoes. And so I think that really comes through in the mechanics that Riley made, and that I then like did my own spin on for Going Rogue.
Fantastic. Well, as we mentioned, both Galactic and Going Rogue use that core kind of mechanics that you've just talked through, but there are some differences between the two of them. So maybe if we start by going through kind of the settings, explaining the differences between those and what those are, and then go into the slightly different tweaks, because I know Going Rogue has, as you basically mentioned earlier, kind of the fate, the tragic sacrifice and things like that. But maybe if we start with the settings. So what is the Galactic setting for people that haven't heard of it before and are just introducing it to them now? How would you introduce that world to them?
Absolutely. So Galactic is very clearly very inspired by Star Wars, and specifically by like the original, like but all three of the trilogies. And that is a good place to start. But also, we have people play and love these games who have never played Star Wars, and we have people who play and love these games who hate Star Wars. And I think part of why that is because I'm a firm believer that any good adaptational media, that is to say media that like adapts a story from a different genre, has to love the original, or a different medium, like a movie into a TTRPG, has to love the original and also has to hate the original, because they have to have something that they want to like argue with in the original to make it interesting and different. And like Riley and I think it sucks that the Jedi are child kidnapping sexless ascetics who like think that whose way of interacting with the Force is the only metaphysically correct way to do it, that you have to suppress all your emotions and connections to people. That's not how this works. Fighting for freedom is about connecting with people and your emotions. And so Galactic is inspired by Star Wars. It is that epic space fantasy and like space opera, but it is also somewhere that you design your own world. And so like each of these pillars, these setting elements that we've talked about have desires. And so Riley's liberation pillar might have desires of like ideological discourse or imagination of a better world. Like you pick to help shape, what does our version of a liberation movement look like? And I've played games of Galactic that have entirely different worlds and stories. Like we're this scrappy band of guerrilla fighters, or we're this popular movement that's present on every planet with like a military like wing or whatever. But like it really depends, what is the story you want to tell? And the mechanics are there to help inspire you and to help you like know how to realize that world. But as far as what it actually is going to be, as far as what the setting is, that depends on what you put into it. And that's something I personally love about belonging outside belonging systems, is they tend to do that. You tend to get these really unique play experiences. That like fun that you get as a GM of building a world for your characters to participate in. What if every player got to do that together at the table? It's like the character and world creation process is actually one of my favorite parts of play. And in a setting like this or a game like this, it really is play. But to answer your question, because we also want to talk about like how is it distinct from Going Rogue?
Yes.
The Galactic pillars largely carry over, but the playbooks are especially what's different. And that's because the Galactic playbooks, like the Ace and the Diplomat and the Defector, they're all people who like tend to feel very excited about the cause, tend to be like these very heroic figures who are very flawed in the ways they interact with other people. Riley loves the messy relational elements, as do I. And those in Galactic tend to be like the ways that we hurt each other that we don't want to, the ways that we are like trying to be kind to each other, but like all are coming with our own trauma and our own flaws. And that gets us into trouble and that hurts other people. And so it's these charming, excited, larger than life heroes who nevertheless are like kind of struggling to be the people they want to be, or like getting in over their heads in danger and all of that stuff. I think we did an official actual play that had like Ifi Nwadiwe on it on the One Shot podcast. And I loved something Ifi did with Galactic, which is he sort of repeatedly flagged, like he had this like hotshot kid pilot who thinks he's going to be amazing because his dad was a pilot. And then he shows up and he's like, oh my God, I was not prepared for war. I'm so in over my head. And he'll have these moments where he says like, Chike's doing the piloting and then realizes like, oh, I don't know how to attack a ship like this. I've never done anything like this. And someone's like, yeah, we have to find a weak point. And if he says to them, I think that comes from y'all, because his playbook is designed so that like, he's got these things that he's good at, but these flaws where he's overconfident and he like gets into danger before he knows what to do. And so those are the sort of flaws that we see in Galactic that require this working together and this like relational ties. And I think that's really beautiful. I can move on to how Going Rogue is different than that if you'd like.
Yeah, that sounds great. So so that gives us the Galactic setting and the uniqueness of that. So let's talk about Going Rogue and that setting and how that's different.
So Going Rogue is focused much more. It is still focused on that relational conflict. Something about both Galactic and Going Rogue is like, if you look at the bulk of the game text, the parts dedicated to the mandate, like the Empire and how you fight it, are actually a lot smaller than the parts dedicated to how you relate to the people that you're working with. Sure. And what that looks like in Going Rogue is that, first of all, I split the liberation. So in Galactic, you have the liberation pillar, which is your like resistance movement, your rebellion. In Going Rogue, it's the Parliament and the intelligence. And the Parliament are the people who are like trying to be accountable to the people at large, trying to hold this democracy with these like principles of how we will make the world a better place, who are trying to like gain popular support and who tend to be like cautious and careful and deliberative. And like, if you have watched the movie, you'd think about like the council room scene led by Mon Mothma. That's like very much, or if you're an Andor fan, like Mon's plot lines, that's the Parliament. And then the intelligence are the network of like spies and soldiers who are like doing whatever it takes to fight the mandate, and who like they don't really want to be accountable to the people. They want reduced oversight. They want to do things that might be a little ethically gray, and they're not above like hurting people who are somewhat innocent of that. But they're doing it because they think like this is the only way that we can win when we are the underdogs. And something that I frame multiple times in the book is that neither the Parliament or the intelligence are the good guys or the bad guys. They are two parts of any liberation movement. I meant to say that in Rogue One, like this is going to be like General Draven, or in Andor, this is going to be Luthen is represented. Sure. Yeah. And these two forces have to be present in any like historical revolutionary struggle if it's going to succeed. And if either one gets out of hand, it doesn't work. If the Parliament gets like too powerful compared to the other, then we end up in a situation where we never take action. We spend the whole time talking about someone. Anyone who's organized has been in a meeting that goes on 20 hours and doesn't decide anything. On the other hand, if the intelligence gets out of hand, then like you start doing things that break down what actually made you different than the thing you're rebelling against. And you like the new system you set up is just as violent. And so the game is kind of about the tension between these two forces, these two groups. And it's fascinating because in the 4 years since I released it, players now so clearly approach the game differently, even though it's like my friends are the same people, but like frustration with in America, the Democrats are in the UK with the Labour Party, like bleeds through, and the Parliament gets pegged as that group and just being like, why are you like useless and not doing anything? But I think that feeling of like putting those emotions into the game, that like mirror, is what I wanted when I made it. Because I was, as I said, very involved in this like street anti-fascist organizing. And I was first an anarchist, then a communist, and involved in lots of both like intergroup and then intra-group conflicts. And I was like, we're on the same side. We both had these strong feelings about how these things should be done. How do we process the ways that we like snipe at each other? And I wanted to be able to like go through that in a setting that wasn't quite as high stakes. And, you know, a GM-less game makes you think from every perspective. You have to be inhabiting both the Parliament and the intelligence when you're playing. And I thought that was a really nice opportunity to like look at it from all angles. And so how Going Rogue is different than Galactic is you get, instead of these people who are like trying really hard to be kind to each other 100% of the time, but like kind of failing, and like you instead get these people who are really like at odds with each other, and like the playbooks are set up to be like very cynical. The spy is someone who like has done horrible things. That scene with Cassian after the council room where it's like, all of these people have done horrible things on behalf of the rebellion, and if we didn't do this now, then none of that would have been worth it. And then the Knight Errant is someone who saw some of that stuff and left. They left the cause and are now like feeling this ache to come back, but very like hesitant. Or the Leverage. This is my attempt to save Jyn Erso, who I want to love, but I think is a badly written character. And the Leverage is literally being blackmailed by the Liberation to be there. Like, we have your ship, or we have your friend. You're going to fight for us. And the game is about, how do those people who don't really like each other at the beginning, lots of inter-party conflict or intra-party conflict, come to be willing to give their lives together for the cause, to recognize in each other the things that they care about, to realize they are on the same side and give everything for it. And so you play this like darker story of like conflict and eventually martyrdom, because I think that's what I needed to be processing at that time. Does that answer your question?
It does, and more, and more. I mean, interestingly, we're talking a bit about the playbooks because we've been talking a lot about the different characters that we're playing. And as you've mentioned, there's the playbooks that lead into the mechanics and who you choose. One thing you mentioned earlier that I do want to pick up is, because I'm a fan of Rogue One and the Andor series, you mentioned Cassian would be the spy in Rogue One, but in Andor would be something different. Could you talk about the playbook you think would represent him best in the Andor series?
Absolutely. So especially in season 1 of Andor, season 2 it's a little more complicated, but in
Well,
season 1,
he's on that journey to becoming the spy, so yes.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I wrote original Going Rogue was also partially a love letter to Cassian. I loved his character well before Andor came out. I like the first thing I wrote was the spy playbook. But as Andor started, I realized like Cassian is not participating in this stuff in season 1 because he believes in it yet. During the Aldani arc, like he has not yet come to the idea that this is important for him to do. He's doing it because Luthen is like, I will give you money and also I will get you in trouble. And because he's already in trouble, because he's like running from all of these debts and stuff like that. He is the playbook that I call the leveraged, the person who is being like blackmailed or otherwise leveraged or forced or compelled or manipulated into participating because he's got all of this debt and Luthen is like, I'll give you this job to get you out of this bad situation. And it was really satisfying to have that happen because the leverage is based on Jyn Erso in Rogue One originally. And something some people know, some people don't, is that Rogue One got a major rewrite. They brought in Tony Gilroy to completely rewrite the script. The original version of the script, Jyn was like a committed rebel the whole time, instead of this like cynical person at the beginning who like wants no participation, who says like, I'm fine with the Imperial flag flying as long as you don't look up. And at some point in the movie, she just like on a dime with no real character reason becomes completely committed to the cause. And that is because it's like mashing two versions of her character together. And what I did with the leveraged was take the part of her character that I thought was interesting and try and give it a real arc, which is to say, she's this person who doesn't want to be here, who, when the rebellion tries to take her out of prison, they uncuff her, and the first thing she does is kick one of them in the chest and try and run away. And so the leverage playbook is someone who's like cynical, doesn't want to be there, but has something within them. It says 2 principles that challenge even your own cynicism are on the leveraged playbook. And that might be everyone deserves a chance to free themselves, or the children deserve a better life than I had growing up. These things are very me focused, which the leverage tends to be, but that if you begin to see how they connect to other people, how you get those things if other people get them, can grow into this universal principle. And I thought that was the interesting thing about Jyn's character, even though they didn't follow up on it. And so I wrote a playbook that follows up on it, that gives them an arc. And then the show happens, and Cassian is this character who is only looking out for himself, who's in a bad situation, who is offered, like, manipulated into participating, and in the process realizes, wait, this is the fight I've been looking for since I was just a kid and like attacked by this force. And we see that in him like listening to Nemec's manifesto in the finale. And Going Rogue literally has a playbook called The Convert, who was inspired by Bodhi Rook, the pilot, who's like new and fresh-faced and just showed up and really believes this is going to be great and nothing could go wrong. It has become the Nemec playbook because of how much people like Nemec. But the Convert playbook has always been designed to pull on the other playbooks towards this moment of realization, this hope, this seeing the world a different way. It didn't exist in the first playtest, and I added it after the first one because I was like, wait, the party needs glue to bring them together, and this is what the Convert is going to do. And I wrote that before Andor came out, and we had leveraged Cassian meet the Convert Nemec, who sacrifices himself and then inspires Cassian to change. And I'm like, I predicted that one. I did the mechanics for that one.
So we're not saying that the writers read your RPG first, but we're just commenting the timeline that things happened.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
I got an itch comment that said it was positively oracular, like an oracle. And I was like, wow, that is the nicest thing anyone has ever said, like with regards to my work in Andor.
Well, you mentioned before earlier there are actual plays up of Going Rogue and of Galactic, so people can, if you prefer to like learn a system by watching an actual play, which I know a lot of people do now, they're up there. The one thing I did notice is that these are kind of one shot, kind of shorter things. But would this game work for longer campaign series as well?
Absolutely. So Galactic, my original Galactic game, I think, was 19 sessions. And like you could go longer. We stopped after that, but like Galactic can go as long as you want, or you can do it one shot. I've done both.
Yeah.
And then the thing about Going Rogue is it has a somewhat natural ending point, which is
Sure.
all of you die.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to happen in one session. And in fact, the APs were recorded in two, where we did like character creation and setup in the first recording, and then like the arc of play in the second. But in systems like this, character creation and world creation is kind of a form of play. But anyway, you can go longer than that. And I've been in Going Rogue games that were 3 sessions. I think probably even the ideal game of Going Rogue is somewhere between 3 and 7 sessions, or maybe 3 to 5, because that really gives your characters time to slowly build this arc over time and this change that happens. And so I wouldn't say it could go for, you'd have to be telling a very specific version of this story to have it going for like a 2 or 3 year campaign the way that Galactic absolutely can. But it can definitely be more than a one shot, and that gives you a lot more like space to breathe with your characters.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Sorry, I did just briefly disappear from the live stream, but returned. But Jess carried on talking, and you would never know. So well done for that. Yeah, fab. That's good to know that you can have that kind of option with them. But as you say, different stories kind of lean into that. When I was looking at Going Rogue, I imagined you could almost do a series of sessions with different characters that tell an overall plot. So you have this vision of the rebellion and what different people have done in it, because obviously there's going to be different sacrifices and things that happen. So, and it gives you a chance to do different playbooks and different characters. So when I was looking at it, I was like, maybe that's something that could be a fun thing.
That's such a fun idea, and I'm going to be taking that to some of my playgroups. That rules. We have like a Discord for all the contributors, because we have over 30 contributors to this crowdfunder. And someone, I think in there, pitched the idea of a game of Galactic, a game of both Galactic and Going Rogue, where in Rogue One, you see this mission happen, and then they hand off the plans on, and that is leading directly into A New Hope. And someone was like, what if you did a game of Going Rogue that then succeeds in handing something over and begin a game of Galactic where they receive whatever it is that your Going Rogue characters sacrifice themselves for? And I was like, that's incredible. And taking that one step further to, let's show all the different sacrifices that are an inevitable part of a revolutionary movement like this, and like show them over time and get to play different playbooks. That's amazing. That really rules.
Fab, I love that. Well, we've been talking a bit, we've talked a lot about the game and things, but I think we should talk a little bit about the crowdfunder, because obviously this is how we make it happen. So the crowdfunder is live right now. It is fully funded, so it's 100% happening. It's got a week left to go. But what kind of things do people get if they back the Kickstarter now at the moment?
Yes. So I'm so excited that we get to produce a box set for this. And like making the components for the box set has been such a fun part of this process. So as I said, there's like this token economy, and the like almost maybe most indulgent part of this box set for me was I wanted metal tokens, because I thought that would feel like really nice in your hands. I love games with metal tokens. So we've got 25 metal tokens with art by Luna P. That's got like one hand, like 2 hands reaching out to clasp each other, and then the other side, like a hand lifting up a blaster rifle and a closed fist, symbology that we're sort of drawing on for the 2 games. We've got 2d6 for like rolling random places and NPCs. We've got a deck of 42 cards that have the NPC traits on them. So if you're like creating an NPC, you just like deal out 2 cards and you get your traits with your moves on them. We've got one of the things I want the most when I'm like playtesting, I'm like, I just can't wait until I have a box set, is play mats for the pillars. And so like it'll be like a really heavy paper or like gray board that you can set on the table to show you the pillar moves and set the tokens on top of it, because a lot of belonging outside belonging systems you play by like printing out the sheets for each of the like setting elements or pillars, and then they fly around the table and everyone's like, where's this one, where's that one, and like the sheets are moving, and I was like, nice raised like play mats would be so helpful. So it'll have all play mats for all the pillars, and then it also comes with, as I said, a copy of I Have the High Ground with an exclusive cover from David Bednar, who did the amazing art for the Galactic Going Rogue cover. And then a project I'm especially excited about, Look Up to the Stars, which is a setting supplement. And I thought a lot about this because these are games where fundamentally you design your own setting. And I think that is part of what is so fun and important about them. So I didn't want to be like, here is what is true about the universe. Instead, like I said earlier, when you're designing these, you pick desires for your pillars, and that helps you build the world. I got 6 authors to, for each of the pillars, choose desires for that pillar, and then do an in-fiction short story. So like a surveillance report or a memo or like a manifesto, like Nemec's manifesto, based on a version of that pillar built off of those desires. And the book will actually say, these are the 2 desires they picked, and here is the story, so that you can see what is it like to take those desires and use them to inspire what your world looks like. And then if you want to pick those same desires and you want to use what they wrote as like an in-universe prop, you can. Like, you can be like, this is a manifesto that exists in the world. But it's also like a demonstration of like, here is how you go from these desires to your own personal setting.
Fantastic. And it is live now on Kickstarter for another week. So the link's in the show notes and is up on stream / in the comments if you'd like to click through and have a look on there if any of this has sounded interesting to you, because the best way to support indie tabletop creators is to buy their stuff if you can.
It is incredibly helpful. This has been like the entire last 6 months of my life has been focused on this project. And so any and all support, it's much appreciated. It's been really cool seeing the response. And I'm realizing I also wanted to say that for Look Up to the Stars, we also got some amazing authors, and we are right now about 10,000 away from the last 2 pillars. I forgot to say that we're like,
oh, the stretch goals. Okay, yeah.
Yes. One of the stretch goals is getting to 6 authors. We're at 4 right now. We've got Jason Morningstar, who did Fiasco and Night Witches, some of my favorite like indie, not D&D games. We've got Geeta Jackson, who used to like write for Kotaku and Aftermath, and like just a really great collection of people. Katrina Dennis, Aaron Lim, yeah, just really fantastic. And if we fund at 75K, we'll get stories from David and Katrina, which I'm very excited about. And then the actual plays, I mentioned that we had Ifi Nwadiwe on them. We've also got Austin Walker and Natalie Watson, for anyone who listens to A More Civilized Age, which is a Star Wars podcast, or Friends at the Table, which is like a really big AP podcast. They're on the Going Rogue actual play. So just some people I was very excited to get to work with, and what they did with the game is so amazing. And I just wanted to share that, and my intense gratitude for the work they've done on this project.
Fabulous. Well, yeah, and if you go to the crowdfunder page, you can see links to both of those, so you can go watch them there. Well, Jess, we're coming up to the end of our time. Thank you so much for coming on and share Galactic and Going Rogue with us. Really excited to see the crowdfunder going well, and hope it continues to do well in the final stretch to get that last 10K. So fingers crossed that's there for you. One last question I have for you before you go is the question I ask everybody, and it's, do you have any recommendations for any other games? And the rules are, it can't be a game you've worked on, and of course it can't be D&D.
Yes, I was originally going to say The Quiet Year, and then I mentioned that a million times, which means I want to give another one.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? Here's a good one for Pride Month. Darling Demon Eclipse has a game called Sapphic World, and Sapphic World is this like 500-page tome of like queer love and sexuality that I think is doing something really unique and interesting in the space. And like, I love Eclipse's work, so highly, highly recommend checking that out.
Fantastic. That's a great recommendation. Thank you so much. So coming up to the end of our time here. So thank you everyone who's watched live for joining in the comments and being part of it. And thank you to everyone who's listened to the podcast as well. As mentioned before, if this has sounded vaguely interesting, go have a look on the crowdfunder and see if any of the pledge tiers are for you, because the best way to support projects like this is to either share them or support them financially if you can. But that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more indie games to share with you. But for now, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you all. Thank you for listening.